Okay, so since it's now 1:30, let's step ahead and jump in. I'll start by introducing myself. My name is Kira Backwell, and I'm an outreach advisor for the Green Municipal Fund. I will be the moderator for this session. And today's webinar is the fourth of 5 days of interactive webinars covering the many ways we at the Green Municipal Fund can help you plan, design, and implement local sustainability projects. Today we'll be focusing on land, waste and transportation sustainability, and we're going to learn about how our funding offers can successfully help you reduce your GHG emissions, improve air quality and restore sites to productive use. If you have any colleagues that will be missing the webinar today that would have wanted to attend, we will be recording this session and it'll be available on our FCM website in a few weeks. So before we step into learning, once again, just to place your questions in the questions section on the right-hand side, and we will answer questions at the end of the presentation. And without further ado, I will introduce Patrick, who is our speaker for today. Patrick Kehoe is my colleague, also an outreach advisor for FCM programs, and more specifically, the Green Municipal Fund. So over to you, Patrick.
Excellent. Thank you, Kira. And hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. I hope you're settled in, comfy, ready to go. I'm just looking at the attendees list here, so pretty cool. We have someone as far out as Campbell River and out east in Nova Scotia, a few folks, and so that's really great to see. And yeah, I'm happy to be here with you all today. So as Kira said, my name is Patrick Kehoe. I am one of our FCM programs advisors. I will get into a little bit more about what we do and how we might be able to help support you in the projects that are going ahead. So also, as Kira mentioned, this is obviously we're going to be focusing today on our land use, our waste diversion, and our sustainable transportation sectors in terms of the funding and the resource support that we provide there. So we will get very specifically into these three sectors. However, just to start off very quickly, and I see some familiar names there, so I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, already. In case there are any newcomers, just very briefly, we're a member-based organization. We're the national voice for Canada's local governments for well over 100 years now. We largely act as an advocacy and lobbying body for our members, the Municipalities of Canada, to our partners in the federal government in terms of the interests of our members. So this is very wide-ranging. It can go from things like the National Housing Strategy that just came through, the doubling of the gas tax fund, the municipal part of cannabis legalization, looking at rural broadband. So a whole wide variety of sort of issues that we cover within the work that we do. Now, sometimes these efforts lead to programs that are specific to certain topics of interest for our members. And the ones that are probably most relevant domestically at this point are our municipal asset management program that looks at improving the asset management planning of municipalities across the country. Our Municipalities for Climate Innovation program, which although currently closed for direct funding, still provides a lot of support in the realm of resources and tools and learning activities focused mostly on climate change mitigation and adaptation. And then finally, the program that maybe many of you are most familiar with, which is what we're going to be looking at today, primarily is our Green Municipal Fund. So the Green Municipal Fund, or GMF, has been around. We're actually celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, so it's very exciting. And generally, this is an environmental sustainability focused fund. So we're looking at projects across Canada, providing funding, providing resources, providing that capacity building, that training, the peer-to-peer networking, all that kind of stuff. And primarily we're focusing on 5 separate sectors. So we have our energy, our waste, our water and wastewater, our transportation, and our land use and brownfield categories. Within these categories, or sectors, we'll say, there are subsectors, so different sort of streams that we look at. Obviously, today we're going to get into the transportation, the waste, and the land use brownfield, but also important to note for everyone that we do have, energy and water as well as other sectors. Often, if you're coming to us with a project in mind, there can be multiple ways of looking at a similar project. For instance, if let's say it's a water project that also has, an energy saving component for it. Okay, so maybe it might seem like a water project, but it's actually something that we would consider under energy offer. And that's part of the job that we do as advisors, is sort of hear what you're saying, what you're trying to do with it, and sort of steer you and frame you in the right direction to, be most successful in accessing the support that we can provide. Another example of that could be, waste, methane, landfill methane capture kind of projects. So yes, it's based on waste, but actually, if you're using that methane for, let's say powering a generator or supporting a facility's energy consumption, it's a waste project, but it's actually maybe an energy project. So all I'm trying to say here is that we offer a very wide variety of funding products. I believe it's now over 60 individual funding products. Before you start thinking about something and applying, just come talk to us, and we can make sure that it's positioned in the best way. So broadly speaking about the GMF, just a little recap over our last 20 years. So we've provided support through direct funding to over 1,300 initiatives. That's been over $860 million worth of approved projects. And cumulatively, these projects have contributed to around 2.6 million tons of greenhouse gas avoided. So there's many metrics towards what our projects results could look like. So in terms of, cubic meters of remediated soil, of total greenhouse gases avoided here, of a reduction in energy consumption, of, total wastewater treated. So there's many different metrics that we look at, but definitely the carbon reduction is obviously something that many projects can focus on. And we're really proud of that number, that all the projects that you and your communities have put together have done over these 20 years. So I'm going to start off first talking about sort of our transportation and waste, more specific stages of projects that we fund. And for anyone who may have been on our water and wastewater webinar yesterday at this time, it might be a bit of a repetition from you, but I think it's really valuable to sort of spell out what we consider a feasibility study and what we consider a pilot project, because these are often, words that can mean many things to many people. So I'll start where we start, which is generally a feasibility study. In terms of the funding related to that, we can cover up to half of the costs to a maximum of $175,000. That is 100% grant-based. And typically what we're looking for when we're talking about a feasibility study is something that's going to get you, ready to be quote unquote shovel ready towards the end. So essentially, let's take the example of, a transportation fleet study where you're looking at, okay, you want to improve or reduce the fossil fuel use within your municipal fleet. So if you're looking at that from a study perspective, first off, you might say, okay, let's determine our baseline. Let's see what vehicles we have now in our fleet. Let's see what our fuel consumption is there. And then we'll go out and let's look for some solutions to improve that. Through the study, then you would evaluate your different solutions of what might get you here and quantify, okay, if we go this route with this many vehicles, we can reduce our total consumption by X% and so forth. And then once you've figured out and you've maybe costed out a few of these options, you select your preferred option and you go ahead and start doing a bit more of a sort of detailed plan, detailed design for that. So that's an example of what we would consider a feasibility study. So something that's, really quantifying your solution about how it's going to, affect your sort of whatever the parameter is. So in this case, it would be a reduction in fossil fuel. And then you're kind of making that next step forward about, okay, how can we turn this into a reality? There's different examples, but basically, I guess what I'm trying to make the point here is that we generally wouldn't fund as a study, sort of research or literary reviews of sort of options out there, or sort of broad scans, broad strategies. That's not what we're looking for here. We're looking really for things that lead to a direct implementation and things that can demonstrate a quantifiable environmental benefit attached to them. Anticipated, of course, at this point, because it's still the study stage. Now moving from there, let's say you've completed your study, and just to be clear, you don't have to do one component or all components with us. If you already have a feasibility study that's ready and you want to get right into a pilot project or a capital project, that's completely fine. But we do like to offer that full spectrum, and hopefully, it makes sense that if you're with us through one part, that you continue with us down the road as, we're familiar with the project and all that good stuff. So moving on to sort of the next phase that we do provide funding for would be pilot projects. Now, not every project needs to do a pilot project. If it's a straightforward enough initiative that you're just going right forward into a full implementation, then of course that's fine. It's all scenario dependent on what your goals are. Now, for pilot projects, we offer generally 50% again of eligible costs to a maximum of $500,000. So it's a large enough amount that it can be really enabling for mini pilots of a decent size. And that's something that we heard from members years ago. We had a lower rate until about, I want to say about almost 2 years ago, and then we've been able to bump that up to $500,000, and I think it's been really enabling to see some of the projects that we've received in let's say in the last year or so based on that increase. We also around the same time made it available for communities of smaller populations, so under 20,000, to request 80% funding. So 80% of total project costs, total eligible project costs, I should say. So this is great, and another a newer kind of enabling function that we've added in recent years that I think has so far had great uptake. I should mention that 80% is not guaranteed. There is sort of conditions that apply to that. Generally, we're looking for projects that can demonstrate innovation and replicability. So if you think of it in terms of, okay, you're going to go out and you're going to do this pilot project, if you're a smaller community and maybe you're in a regional organization of some sort, is there a way for you to share that? Is there a case study or a tool or a guide or something that you can produce as part of your pilot that's going to help other communities, use it as an example if it proves to be successful? So that's the kind of thing we're looking for when we're considering going from 50 to 80%. And really what we look for in a pilot, similar to the study, is we want to see, you've identified in your study, okay, if we go with this solution, these are the expected results we're going to get. And then a pilot, you're going to test this out on the small scale. You're going to look at something for a defined period of time. Generally, no more from 1 to 3 years is kind of our target for pilots. And then you're going to have a pretty thorough monitoring and reporting process. So we're going to want to see that, you have these questions that you're looking to be answered and you're looking to test. And at the end of that, based on the results, you're going to come back and say, okay, that worked, that didn't work. This is how, if successful, this is how we're going to scale this up. This is how we're going to replicate this, or this is how we're going to, turn this into a permanent function of whatever service or building or what have you that you might be up to. So it's wide open in a sense, but it's also limiting in the fact that we really need to see that something is being tested. It's not, okay, we want to buy one electric vehicle for our fleet and see how it works. It needs to be more than that. It needs to be evaluating, let's say, what an EV could be best used for in terms of routing, in terms of jobs, in terms of operations and maintenance, and the cost associated. And you know, you really need to be proving something at the end that, okay, this is something we needed to figure out. I'll go into capital projects now, and as it indicates, and you're all probably familiar with the term capital projects, but this is for your you know, your large scale, your permanent installations, your you know, definitely the sort of bigger idea type of projects. For these, we can cover up to 80% of eligible costs, to a maximum of $10 million. We do listen to higher amounts. 10 million is sort of our starting high ceiling. However, you know, depending on the scenario, we're always open to listen. Now, the major difference here, of course, is that it's not grant-based completely. It's a combination of low-interest loans with grants. So typically how it would work is we would provide you with a low-interest loan for your project, and then we would additionally add a 15% grant. That's like 15% of the loan grant. So if you look at it as a full $10 million loan, then you begin a $1.5 million grant. And what this grant does is really drives down the effective interest rate on your loan. I know our rates change from month to month as the markets change. However, right now, I mean, for a 10-year term for a municipality who's applying, you're looking at about a negative interest rate just based on the fact that you're applying this 15% grant to it. We offer fixed rate or fixed term loans for 10, 20, and 30 years. The rates depend on the applicant applying, of course. So municipalities have the access to those better rates than sort of the municipal corporations, and then private and NGOs we would, of course, analyze on a case-by-case basis. So that kind of leads me into this next sort of general part, which is who can apply. So of course, all Canadian municipal governments are eligible to apply. That includes FCM members and non-FCM members equally. There's no advantage either way. But we also allow project partners of municipalities to apply. So this can be private sector entities, municipally owned corporations, nonprofits, NGOs, research institutes, as you see the list here. But the key being that this is still a municipal project, and the municipality who's partnering with these entities are involved. So when we say involved, typically for our grants, so our feasibility studies and pilot projects, we're looking for about a 10% cash contribution from the partnering municipality in the project to demonstrate that it is something of interest the municipality wants to see go forward, and that you know, it is within the municipal realm of the type of things that we do fund. I always think with non-municipal applicants, it's even more important to come and speak with us early, and we can make sure that everything is sort of in line and will work. And in terms of who would the lead applicant be, it's the one who's incurring the costs for the project. So sometimes it makes more sense for a third party to operate a project and cover the costs and go through the process. However, it's really up to how you want to see how the money is going to be flowing in terms of how we would consider it. I will quickly, we're just almost about getting into the actual bulk of our talk today, but I did want to add a little note on some of the improvements we've made to our processes. So this is generally you know, more relevant to those of you who have had previous experience with FCM and our grants processes. So the number one thing is we've now enabled advanced disbursement. So I've noticed that many municipalities, when listing their barriers to, you know, getting sustainability projects off the ground, it's that initial upfront cost barrier, which of course is even more important these days. So what we've done is enabled municipalities and municipal corporations to access up to 70% of their grant right up front. So this would be at the time of a grant agreement signature. The conditions that apply to that are basically that your sources of funding are confirmed and your project team is in place. So if we have those sort of assurances there, then you can access up to that 70%. Likewise, for nonprofits, they can access up to half of their grants right up front as well. And private entities at this point are not eligible for advanced disbursement. They will be reimbursed based on cost incurred model. The next improvement we have is that we now allow 100% staff costs for a project. So what we mean by that is if you have the internal expertise to you know, conduct a feasibility study or a pilot project or what have you, the cost of your staff at the municipality is can account for 100% of the project costs. This is different. Before we had a 10% cap on that, so now that hopefully is really enabling for both the best person to do the job and also hopefully cost wise. This goes also for non-for-profits. So if you're thinking of entities like a conservation authority or sort of regional bodies that might be best in line to manage these types of projects, then their work too can also be included as eligible costs up to 100% of the total project. Private entities are still limited to the 10%. So the work that they do, if they're the lead applicant, can only account for a maximum of 10% of total project costs. The last one I'll mention really quickly is just our sort of reporting procedures. For those of you who have done a grant with us before, when you're looking for disbursement, previously we had wanted to see evidence of all the costs incurred in the form of invoices. We've removed that. Now we're looking for just a letter of attestation, basically saying, okay, this is what our projected estimate, or excuse me, our estimated costs were. This is what we actually spent, and go from there. So hopefully a lot more streamlined and a lot quicker. Okay. Hope everyone's still with me. Now we're getting into the meat of the presentation where we're going to be looking at the three sectors that we came here to talk about. I'm going to go through sort of the subsectors of the streams and share a few examples of projects that have been completed by other municipalities, and then kind of wrap up with a bit of our resources that we do have available, and then we'll be open for questions. So I hope you're starting to think about things, and feel free to throw the questions in now. Kira will take a look at them and make sure to sort of gather everything for me towards the end. Okay, so we're going to start off with transportation. So our transportation offer comes with sort of two branches to it. The first branch, which is one that I've already sort of alluded to, is the reduction or avoidance of fossil fuel use in municipal fleets. And when we say municipal fleets, that can be anything from, your buses to your light heavy duty, to your garbage trucks, to your ice resurfacers, Zambonis, to, like it can really be quite a wide range of subsets within your fleet. We look at sort of different types of eligible projects. So some examples, as you can see here, is maybe purchasing properly sized fleets. So if you have a ton of big trucks and you really don't need them, you could easily do the work with a sedan, depending on what it is, and you want to properly size your fleet that would actually reduce the amount of fossil fuels that you're using. That could be an option. The sort of alternative fuel infrastructure and electric cars and hybrids and all that kind of stuff can definitely fit into it. We understand that, often if you're buying an electric car, it might be the more straightforward piece where the actual fuel infrastructure is really the more intricate in terms of how you're gonna plan it out, and working with your utility partners and retrofitting garages and all that kind of stuff can actually be some of the more challenging pieces. So we definitely support that. There can also be things like intelligent transportation systems, so anti-idling, sort of routing software that maybe gives you a best routing versus, driving around, that kind of stuff. Now, the key indicator here or threshold that needs to be met is a reduction of fossil fuel use by at least 20%. So whether you're looking at one of these measures or combining these measures together, let's say you're going down the study route, the feasibility study route, you'd want to be able to quantify that what you're doing is going to reduce you know, the fossil fuels by at least 20% in your fleet or your subset of fleet, you know, however it might be sort of framed in that sense. So that's number one, and we'll get to an example, I believe, shortly. Hopefully that's straightforward enough. Our second sort of arm, I guess you'd say, is a little bit trickier, I would say, to quantify at this point, but definitely something that we do fund. And this is really looking at projects that encourage a shift to less polluting modes of transportation. So if you're thinking about, you know, things like public transit, like ride sharing, ride hailing, providing last mile solutions to you know, to transit hubs, active transportation infrastructure, bike paths, walking paths, you know, it can be a whole wide range of things that are enabling your residents essentially to shift from that sort of single passenger vehicle kind of archetype into ways that can reduce the GHG emissions around. So we don't have a specific threshold, obviously, for this one, but what we do need to see is some sort of quantified amount of either, you know, the vehicle kilometers traveled that you're taking off the road, or a direct reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. So there's different examples of this, like if you think about a bike path, it's not likely that we would fund a bike path that's kind of through the forest in a recreational sense. We'd be looking more at you know, commuting corridors where you can encourage people to actually get out of their cars as they drive to work every day and start taking a bike. So that kind of stuff. I'll go into a few quick examples here. So speaking of this sort of arm, category 2 of our transportation funding, the first one I'll share for you is from the city of Plessisville in Quebec. And this was a pilot project that's actually between several municipalities. I believe there's 6 of them in total. And the idea was that they were going to incorporate some EVs and some EV charging infrastructure into their municipal fleet, but then also on top of that, make it part of the community in terms of a car sharing sort of system, you know, after working hours, I guess you would say. So it was pretty cool. So it's car sharing in the sense that it's keeping people from, you know, calling taxis or borrowing cars or taking their own cars, but it's also an electric vehicle, right? So there's sort of that double-edged part to it that is, you know, lowering emissions based on the car type, but also lowering emissions based on the sharing model of it all. So that was a really cool one. I believe it's still ongoing, if I'm not mistaken, but we'll see. The second one I'll share you is kind of going back to that first category of a municipal fleet. And this one is really neat too, because this one is definitely ongoing still, is that it incorporates sort of the different sectors. So back when I was talking about how, like, oh, it's a waste project, but it could be an energy project, or, you know, vice versa like this. Oops, sorry, skipped ahead too much. So this one from the town of Georgina is cool because what they're doing is taking actually sort of produce waste from groceries and farms and organics and that thing, and turn it into micro biodigester technology that is going to compress it into renewable natural gas, which they will then use to fuel the municipal vehicles. So it's sort of a waste / transportation project, and something that's, you know, super neat to see, and that we're definitely keen on seeing the results of this project as it continues to unfold. This last one I'm going to show you is from the city of Vancouver. It is another one that's looking at sort of active transportation, and some of you might be familiar with it if you're out from the Lower Mainland there. It's the Berrard Bridge reconstruction. So taking what I believe was a 6-lane highway, but 6-lane roadway, and incorporating active transportation lanes, like separated bike lanes on either side, as this is a, you know, a popular commuting route, and showing through a study that they previously did how you know, they can anticipate a modal shift from single passenger car use to this bike, and then associate that with actual greenhouse gas emissions. So that's what we have for transportation. I'm going to move on to waste now, but keep keep any questions you have in mind about transportation, and we can go over towards the end. So moving through to waste with excellent landfill photo. Waste, similar to transportation, sort of has two streams to it. They're a bit more alike, I guess I would say. Our first stream is basically waste diversion. So the threshold for this is we're looking at projects that can get municipalities waste diversion, so across the municipality, to 60%. For those municipalities who are already at 60%, we're just looking for projects that will make them incrementally better. So even if it's a 5% increase, it could still be considered eligible. So some examples of what we would consider on our waste diversion program would be things like, reuse and recycling programs and infrastructure. So if you're thinking about material sorting facilities, and other incentives that might encourage diversion within your community. Could be launching of organic programs in places where those aren't established. So there's quite a few options there. The 60% total is high, and we understand that, and there's definitely different measures that maybe you could put together to sort of evaluate if you can get there, even if it's a staged approach. The second category is our waste stream management. So this is more dedicated to waste streams of concern. So if you're thinking things like biosolids or hazardous waste, certain types of plastic, things that are more difficult to actually just send through the regular sort of processes and systems that you might have in place already. So speaking of that sector, or that subsector, I'll start by sharing this project, which is really cool. It's a pilot project from the city of Markham, Ontario, and basically it was looking at textile recycling. So textiles being sort of a waste stream of concern in the sense that there isn't, the mechanism for recycling them exactly through most municipal solid waste services. So this one was pretty neat. The second one I'm going to show you is actually more the waste diversion portion. So this is from Quebec as well, or also from Quebec, from the city of Sherbrooke. This was a capital project, so we provided them with a $7.5 million loan and a grant of about $750,000, which was our sort of limit at the time. And this is really for the sorting facility that's throughout sort of a region around there. The idea was they would be able to achieve that target diversion rate of 60%. They also incorporated some other kind of cool aspects to it in the terms that it was LEED certified, so energy efficient. They had some rainwater collection components to it, so they kind of looked at a systems view of not only supporting their waste diversion, but some other environmental aspects to it. So pretty cool. So I'm going to keep moving on here and get into our last category, which is our land use and brownfields category. I'm bringing this slide back up just because there's a slight difference in terms of for transportation and for waste, we only have our study, pilot project, and capital project funding. However, for this sector, we also include plans. So it's the only sector that we have planning grants. They follow the exact same sort of financial model as studies. So that 50% maximum to $175,000. So starting with brownfields, and for those of you, I'm sure most of you are probably familiar with the brownfield, but when we're talking brownfields, we're talking about contaminated properties. So places where the soil or groundwater might be contaminated due to, past uses kind of thing. So for brownfields, we fund, first off, site remediation and risk management. So I know in Ontario and in other places, it would be referred to as a phase 2 environmental site assessment. So you kind of have your phase 1 where you've figured out, okay, there's likely contamination here. It's an old gas station, it's an old, tannery, whatever it might be. And then you need to go in and actually drill some holes and delineate that sort of contamination. So that's what we would fall under our feasibility study category for this site remediation category. And then say you've figured out, okay, we know where the contamination is, we know what our remediational action plan is going to be, and now we need to actually act on it. Then our capital funding can come in and provide that low interest loan grant combination for actually remediating the properties. We also support renewable energy production on a brownfield, which is a little different. So we don't support renewable energy, standalone renewable energy, solar installations, wind turbines. We don't support that regularly. But if it is done on a brownfield property as a way to turn it into a productive use again, it is eligible through here. So it's sort of a loophole that we have to allow for renewable energy funding. We also have brown site redevelopment, which is, let's say you have a brownfield site that you're going to remediate and then you're going to build an energy efficient municipal facility on. We can bunch those together into one application through this sort of subsector. We also need less stringent energy thresholds for any new building that might come on there. So that's another option if you're thinking of maybe combining two things in one. And then lastly, which refers to sort of the planning, is we provide community brownfield action planning. So in lots of communities, these might be called community improvement plans, which is basically looking at doing a scan of your municipality, identifying your brownfields, what needs to be done here, developing incentive programs so that you can get developers in there, you can get buyers in there to hopefully take on the role of remediating these and turning these back into productive uses. Obviously that's great for tax purposes for the city going forward. It's good for the social fabric of towns. I don't need to tell you guys about this. I'm sure you know, and I'm sure every single one of you has at least one of these properties in your community. So this is a really great way to sort of set that all up. And then from there, you can start knocking them off one by one. And you can come to us for funding for the actual individual properties, but at least here you get that strategic start to it. And the last thing that we fund within this sort of land use brownfield planning is our Sustainable Neighborhood Action Plans, SNAP for short form. So these are really looking at generally the neighborhood level, but depending on the size of your municipality, you can look at your full municipality. And what we're looking for here is similar to the brownfield action plan, however, beyond just land use and brownfields, right? We're looking at incorporating district energy or sustainable transportation, waste and water reductions, all that kind of stuff. So sort of taking the whole holistic view of a neighborhood or a section of your waterfront or downtown or whatever it might be, and really looking at different factors that you can incorporate in to kind of guide development. And it really needs to be action oriented. We're not talking about an integrated community sustainability plan here. It's something that builds on that and has tangible actions that you follow through with, or you hopefully can follow through with more directly at the end of it. So I'll just share two quick examples, or maybe three here. So the first one is just from north of Ottawa, Municipality of Chelsea, Quebec. This was a brownfield feasibility study, so they were doing some phase 2 environmental site assessments on tracts of land around a railway that they're turning into a bike path. So one of the rails to trails kind of initiatives, which is super cool. So I'm just going to speed through these because I know we're getting short on time in terms of questions, but this again is an example of our brownfield feasibility study type funding. This is from the city of Moncton, which is an example of our brownfield action plan. So as I mentioned, this was one where the city was able to take a wider view of all the properties or many of the brownfield properties within sections of their municipality, and sort of make those plans and those incentive programs for going forward in terms of accelerating the remediation and the bringing these properties back into value within the community. And the last one is sort of an example of our SNAP, so our Sustainable Neighborhood Action Planning. This is coming from the district of Tofino in BC. It's the western coast of Vancouver Island. I hope some of you have been there. It's absolutely beautiful. And, a community that was primarily forestry and fishing, and then in recent decades has obviously become quite a large tourist attraction and service-oriented community in certain ways. And so they wanted to look at how they can kind of move forward in terms of considering what they want to do about their transportation. what they want to do about, waste and water conservation. Is there opportunities for community energy systems? So all these types of sort of holistic approach, like I mentioned before, of how they can maybe, intertwine different goals and different objectives within their sustainability plans, and then make them action oriented and go forward for that. So really neat stuff. So that's where I'll stop now for sort of the sector specific stuff. I'm just going to go through very quickly just some sort of wrap up things. Number one, I mean, it's the thing everyone's thinking about and talking about. Obviously, there's a pandemic going on, and municipalities particularly are being put in a rough spot. Cash flow is never always full. So in this time, definitely not any more than before. So in terms of supporting your sort of green economic recovery, we don't have any indication now on that the potential of stimulus funding or a role that we might play in this. But for now, we do have these feasibility study funding, so we can provide you with that support to get ready, so that there is funding that does become available. Your projects are ready to go. So that's one thing that it can be hopefully very enabling for the future, the hopefully near future. We also have our capital projects that are still available for funding too. So if you did have projects that were planned for this year and then maybe, okay, can we still go ahead with this? Perhaps come talk to us. Maybe our combination of funding might enable you to still go ahead with some of these larger capital projects that you did have planned. In terms of our resources, I mean, I really encourage you to visit our website, fcm.ca/resources. There's tons of stuff there, case studies, guides, toolbooks, examples of other projects, provincial specific stuff, especially for brownfields. Our brownfield resources are just amazing. We have tons of them. So please go check that out. Speaking of that, on there we have our project funded database. So this includes basically all the projects that we have funded before. So you can see what other communities have done. You can filter by, project type and all that stuff. So again, encourage you to go check those out. If you have questions, if you need to be looking to be pointed in the right direction, come talk to us. Hopefully we'll be able to help you out there. So really the key takeaways that I want you to take from this presentation is that obviously we fund a wide variety of initiatives. So if something doesn't jump out to you right away, it's still worth a conversation with us. Maybe we can say, oh, you know what, actually that fits there. Or we can say, well, it might not fit now, but maybe you can check out these resources, these tools, these training options, and maybe it might help you to formulate, a different addition to your project or something like that. And the last point is really what I want to hammer home here is that our advisors, myself, Kira, the other members of our team are really, our job is here to help you along every step of the way until you get in your applications in the door. So if you go to our website and you're saying, wow, there's 60 different projects that they fund, how am I going to get through this? Come to us. Give us a synopsis of your project. Set up a phone call. We're happy to chat. It's our job. We can kind of coach you through the best way to position things. If you're, something pops up in the application form and you're saying, oh, I don't know what this means, come to us. We're happy to guide you through that. That's what we do. We're here essentially just to help you and enable your projects to access our funding. So please reach out early and often in your project planning if FCM is something that you're considering looking to for funding. Just wrapping up here, I mean, if some of you, I'm sure, are connected to FCM Connect, it's our weekly e-bulletin. Great place to get information on new tools, new funding, case studies, all that stuff. So again, encourage you to sign up there. This is my direct email line, so please, again, reach out to me personally. That's totally fine. And one last thing, just join our next webinar. So this is our 4th webinar this week, and we have one more on Monday. It's looking at a new program wing of the GMF, which is our Community Efficiency Financing Program. So more looking at enabling municipalities to set up programs that they can support their residents and sort of the upfront costs for home energy retrofits. So really cool new stuff that's coming out of GMF. So if you're interested in that at all, please attend. It's the same time, 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. So I'll stop there, and Kira, if you'd like to join me back online, we can maybe take up a few questions if there are any.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Patrick. That was an excellent presentation. I feel like I learned myself listening to you. Okay, so we have a few questions in, and please, if anyone has questions that they'd like to ask, now is the time. Feel free to write them into our question box on the right-hand side of your screen. So we have a question in here from Kevin Boyle. It's to do with waste. So for the 60% diversion, is that just from residential or ICI as well? ICI diversion in Ontario is very low and likely not doable. So ICI being industrial, commercial, and institutional waste.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. So we consider the 60% just based on whatever services the municipality is responsible for providing. So generally just residential. If you do want to include the ICI sector in projects, of course we encourage that, but that 60% will be based on whatever the municipality is responsible for.
Great. Another question is, are risk assessments an option for brownfield project grants if remediation is not feasible, or would potentially cause more damage to the ecosystem than excavation or treatment?
Another great question, and the answer is yes, absolutely. I didn't mention that, but through our feasibility study funding for brownfield remediation, that can include, phase 2 environmental site assessments. It can include risk assessment, and it can include remedial action plan, all within that. So, by all means, if it makes the most sense, to your project to do the risk assessment approach, that is eligible.
So we have another question in from Marcia. It's actually a follow-on from the previous question. So the 60% diversion is based on collection and not diverted from landfill, just to clarify.
So it's based on diversion from landfill. So we want to see the 60%, reach a 60% total diversion from landfill.
Okay, super. So opening the platform again, if anyone has any final questions, please let us know. I have a couple of questions that I think are useful to ask. They were asked yesterday and I thought they were very helpful. So can you touch on what is the assessment process for applications? And in that, maybe just touch on the time frame for project duration.
Yeah, absolutely. Those are great questions as well. So in terms of assessment, how we generally do it with a project would be, as I mentioned, if you have an idea, unless it's like very, very straightforward and you're comfortable with FCM or GMF processes, we always suggest come and talk to one of us, one of the advisors first. We can at least do kind of a high-level assessment to make sure you're going in the right direction and you're applying to the right thing and you're likely eligible. So that's sort of a first step, I would say. And of course we help you along the way until you're actually submitting. Once you've submitted, you'll get an assigned project officer who'll be dedicated to your application, they will take you through the life cycle of your project, which includes a bit more of a detailed review, some more support that we offer in terms of suggesting, adjustments or additions, or making sure your documentation is all in order, all that kind of stuff. And once we're both ready, we then send it off to third-party peer reviewers. So these are experts in, whatever sector you're applying for. They come from the private sector, the municipal sector, and the federal government. So there's kind of a combination of skills and people there. Based on basically their scoring of your application, we decide to make a recommendation to our council and to the FCM executive board on if it should be approved or not. So that's sort of the high level, I guess, process for getting your application approved. Once it's approved, that same project officer will work through with you to prepare a grant agreement and determine sort of your disbursement schedules in terms of the funding and when you want to see it. Project timing for approval, I'd say right now for a feasibility study or pilot project, it's probably about a 3 to 4 month process from the day you submit. That all depends on how complete your application is, how quickly you're able to make adjustments that we request. But yeah, sort of in that realm. Capital projects is probably 4 or 5 months, maybe 6, depends on the kind of cycle of it or how much work has to go into sort of the credit analysis and all that kind of stuff. But generally, those are sort of the terms that we're looking at. However, it's important to note that the day you submit is the day you are able to start incurring cost that would then be eligible. So if you want to start going on your project in between that sort of gap when you've submitted but you haven't been approved yet, you can, and those costs will be eligible. There's the risk, obviously, that if you're not approved, you're spending money that you might not get support for. But if that's something that you're willing to do, then there is that option. In terms of timelines and lengths of projects, we usually keep things within about a 3-year window. We are flexible. This isn't a drop dead date if we understand there are delays in many projects for many reasons. So that's something that we would consider on case-by-case basis with you.
Super, good answer, thank you. Okay, we actually have a few more questions that have just come in. I'm going to read them as I go. So Christina Beaton says, if we have plans to complete an organics feasibility study and have already put out our request for proposals, are we still eligible to apply for funding, or should we have requested funding prior to putting out the RFP?
No, you're absolutely still able to apply. I think, I mean, the costs associated before you apply, so in terms of developing an RFP, those wouldn't be eligible, but anything going forward from the day you apply is. I actually think it's advantageous to have an awarded RFP. There is a section we do evaluate project management and who's going to be doing the project, and what the costs are and all that kind of stuff. So it is actually advantageous to have an awarded RFP or a proposal or the like. So absolutely, you're fine there.
Thank you, that's great. And then a quick question from Marcia. She asks, is clean fill considered diverted material? And she follows on with, if it is used in operations.
So if it's repurposed for something, yeah, I'd have to double check, but I don't see why not, that we would consider that diversion. If it's not, yeah, if you're repurposing something for a better use, then I'm just thinking of, we would consider biosolids and other things like that if you're repurposing it for energy use or something. So I think it would fall under the same category, but I'm happy to connect after and go through it more specifically.
Yeah, so maybe Marcia, if you want to pop Patrick an email, he'd be happy to follow up on that question specifically. Great, thank you. So Roland asks, I'm working with a town with a small tax base. Would their contribution have to be their cold hard cash, or could they leverage from other projects?
So if you mean leverage from other projects or other programs,
maybe we could say in kind rather than cash.
Yeah, so if the community is the lead applicant, i.e. the one absorbing the cost of the project, then their contribution can be 10%, and it can be in kind. It can be their staff time. It could be the administrative costs that it for completing the application and reporting to FCM. So there's different ways of structuring it. And let's say it's a study and we're covering 50% and they have 10%, and they're getting the additional 40% from somewhere else, then that's fine too. I should have mentioned that too, that we're stackable for feasibility studies with other provincial grants and just not federal. And then at pilot and capital stages, we're completely stackable with federal and provincial grants.
I just see one more question I think come in, and I'm going to check that I haven't missed any. So David asks, oh, apologies, 1 second. Would a development of a phased snow disposal site be eligible? And if so, which category?
Yeah, that's a good one. I almost think it could maybe,
Thinking on the fly.
Yeah, I'm thinking on the fly. Like, to me, that almost sounds like it might fit under our stormwater quality. If you were able to put a sort of snow disposal site with some sort of quality control parts to it, that are reducing, maybe the salt content that's coming out of the soil or something. I think that could maybe almost be a route to go with it. I mean, it's not typically a waste project in my head that I'm thinking, but that's a good one. That's one I'll have to maybe dig a bit deeper into and go for. But I encourage you to reach out to me and we can discuss more specifically.
Brilliant. Thank you, David, for that question. David, I also see you had asked another question earlier. I hope that one was answered for you in Patrick's prior answer to the time frame for projects. So I'll just give it a few more seconds to see if anyone has any very final questions. But other than that, I think maybe we can start to wrap up. So thank you, Patrick, for your time today and presenting to us the various funding offers that are available for plans, studies, pilot projects, and capital projects, all of which are there to assist municipalities in reducing GHG emissions, improving air quality, and restoring sites to productive use. And thank you to all the participants. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to learn about our funding offer and about our organization. And remember that once again, myself and Patrick and anybody really in FCM is here to help you through your needs, to have your needs met through our funding offers. Please feel free to reach out to Patrick through his email, which is displayed below. And also a reminder that the recording of this webinar will be available on the FCM website over the coming 2 weeks or so. And additionally, there is a survey that will pop up at the end of this webinar. So if you wouldn't mind taking a few moments to fill it out, we'd really appreciate it, as it helps us improve our processes for ongoing webinars, especially at this time when many things are online. So thank you. There is a final question, so I will just ask it. It's from Daryl. Would you ever consider funding a multi-community incinerator in more remote areas where logistics to the nearest landfill is 150 kilometers away-ish?
Yeah, good question. So we do actually, and that's great because I didn't bring it up, but we do have slightly different waste threshold requirements for remote communities. That does include incineration as an ability to use, as a solution that you can use. So we're looking for, pretty sure, I think it's a 15% improvement in diversion rate for remote and northern communities. And incineration is a technique that can be used. Whereas, let's say it was here in Ottawa would need to be at 60% diversion before we would consider a thermal process for waste incineration. So, yeah, I think if you reach out to me, Daryl, that would be the best place to start, and then we can figure out if it could work.
That's great. So I think that's it then for questions. Thank you again to everybody for your time today. Thank you, Patrick. And please join us on Monday for our final presentation of this Webby Week. And all the best. Enjoy your weekend. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.